Chapter 3 Standing in front of the 8th Division barracks, Uehara Shiroa let out a leisurely yawn. Although it was still early, he had already begun contemplating where to start his exciting nightlife. However, before he could make a decision, he noticed a familiar sight: a Shinigami from the 8th Division hurriedly reporting something to a female Shinigami he knew quite well. The slender girl with glasses, a book tucked under her arm, was none other than Ise Nanao, the 10th seed of the 8th Division. She was Kayaraka Shuinsue's niece and, over time, had become a good friend of Uehara Shiroa. Like Lisa Yadamaru, they had met through their shared love of reading. The soldier quickly finished his report and left, leaving Nanao alone. Curious about her serious expression, Uehara Shiroa stepped forward to greet her. "Yo, Nanao-chan. What's with that look? Something happened?" Hearing his voice, Ise Nanao turned to him, her brows slightly furrowed. "Uehara Shiroa, something serious happened in Rukongai." Her voice was calm but carried a weight of concern. "The 12th Division has just detected an abnormality. A large number of civilians in Rukongai have gone missing over the past month. The 12th Division has already reported this information to the Captain Commander. Just now, an advance investigation team of 10 Shinigami was dispatched to look into it. Now, all divisions have been notified." Her tone was professional, but the situation was anything but ordinary. Even though the civilians of Rukongai were often seen as disposable in the grand scheme of things, mass disappearances still raised alarms. This was because the balance of the spiritual world had to be maintained. The number and strength of souls in Soul Society, the human world, Hueco Mundo, and even Hell had to remain in equilibrium. If one realm became overpopulated or depleted, it could cause a catastrophic collapse of the entire spiritual cycle. This was why the Captain Commander had immediately sent an investigation squad. Upon hearing Ise Nanao's report, Uehara Shiroa's mind clicked. It's happening. Coincidentally, at that very moment, his system sent a new prompt. System notification. Special Mission 7, witness the birth of the Visored. On a full moon night, something sinister is unfolding in the depths of Rukongai. A secret experiment is taking place. You decide to investigate and witness the birth of the massed army with your own eyes. Reward, random ability or item. Special missions were what truly accelerated his growth. Daily missions were steady, long-term investments. Special missions, on the other hand, were the jackpot, the kind of rewards that could make him absurdly powerful overnight. If luck was on his side, he could even obtain EX-ranked abilities and become unstoppable. However, special missions weren't guaranteed, they had to be triggered. Based on Uehara Shiroa's own observations, the highest chance of triggering a special mission was when he was involved in key events of the plot. That's why. Until he became truly invincible, he had no plans to drastically alter the original storyline. Smiling lightly, he patted Ise Nanao's shoulder in a reassuring manner. "Don't worry, Nanao-chan. With the wise leadership of the Captain Commander and the Central 46, Soul Society will continue to be prosperous, peaceful, and harmonious." Ise Nanao narrowed her eyes at him. There was something off about the way he said that. The words themselves were perfectly fine, official, even, but coming from Uehara Shiroa's mouth, they somehow sounded sarcastic. But why? She couldn't quite put her finger on it. Before she could question him further, Uehara Shiroa simply waved and walked away. After a leisurely stroll, humming a tune, Uehara Shiroa returned to his residence. As a seated officer of the 1st Division, his living conditions were exceptional. His house even had a private courtyard, not as extravagant as those belonging to captains, but spacious enough for training. Not that he trained outside. No. All of his training took place indoors. And for good reason. His entire house was layered with powerful keto barriers, not just one, but multiple layers. Though these barriers weren't as powerful as the Soul King's soul-blocking membrane, they were still more than enough to block all forms of surveillance. After all, the Technology Development Bureau was still in its infancy. And Aizen's grand scientific project had only just reached a critical turning point. At this stage, there weren't as many black tech surveillance tools in use. Still, Uehara Shiroa preferred to be cautious. He wasn't just guarding against Aizen's ambition. He was also wary of the Invisible Empire. Yawacha's method of stealing Bankai was something worth preparing for. During the Thousand-Year Blood War, Yamamoto Genryusai had unleashed the strongest Bankai in history, Zenka no Tachi. Yet, in the very next moment, Yawach stole it. In the blink of an eye, the strongest captain commander in history was reduced to ashes. A tragic and absurd end. Uehara Shiroa wasn't going to let that happen to himself. Upon reaching his bedroom, Uehara Shiroa channeled his Ryatsu. Immediately, his Zanpakuto, Shunkyo, emitted a faint white glow. In an instant, his entire room became shrouded in an invisible force, sealing it from outside interference. Now, it was completely secure. Seating himself cross-legged, he placed Shunkyo across his lap and began his daily blade meditation practice. In Soul Society, a Shinigami's Zanpakuto was their core, comparable to an immortal cultivator's life-bound treasure. A powerful Zanpakuto could define a Shinigami's entire combat style. Take Aizen, for example. Without Kyokusuijetsu, he would have never been able to toy with Soul Society the way he did. Of course, his absurd Ryatsu and intellect played a role, too. After all, even when Tsunoyoshiro Tokunada recreated Kyokusuijetsu using the Enreikyoten, it wasn't nearly as powerful. The true strength of a Zanpakuto wasn't just in its abilities. It was also tied to the user's mastery, will, and soul resonance. That's why mastering blade meditation was essential. It had been a respected technique in Soul Society for thousands of years. Reaching a high level of blade meditation allowed a Shinigami to directly communicate with their Zanpakuto, greatly enhancing their control over Shurkai and Bankai. And thanks to his shadow clones, Uehara Shiroa was making absurd progress. As he closed his eyes and synchronized with Shunkyo, the Zanpakuto's cold white glow intensified. Their connection deepened. Satisfied, Uehara Shiroa studied his blade. Shunkyo resembled an ancient longsword, exuding a majestic, restrained aura. Compared to other Zanpakuto with exotic transformations, Shunkyo's form was simple yet powerful. But its ability was absolutely broken. Chapter 4 Shunkyo, Uehara Shiroa's Zanpakuto, was a system reward and ability perfectly suited for him with limitless potential. Its Shurkai had two stages, with the first stage being permanent, meaning his Zanpakuto was always in its released state. This granted him a truly broken ability. He could enter an intangible state at any time, making him immune to all physical and spiritual attacks. However, like Kamui, he was unable to attack while intangible. Even so, the energy consumption for maintaining this state was minimal. With his Ryatsu, Uehara Shiroa could theoretically remain intangible for days without issue. Uchiha Obito had dominated the ninja world with a 5-minute intangibility limit. Uehara Shiroa had no cooldown. The horror of Shunkyo could be easily imagined. And that was just the first stage of Shurkai. The second stage, which required manual activation, was even more terrifying. By overlapping Shunkyo's space with a portion of reality, he could slice through space itself, allowing him to attack in ways that were completely unavoidable. This made his second stage Shurkai a fusion of Op no Mi's room, One Piece, an absolute domain where he dictated the rules. Kakashi's Kamui, Naruto, instant, precise spatial destruction. In this state, even Hiero, Arrancar's steel skin. Spiritual pressure-based defense. High-level keto barriers were utterly useless. Against his second-stage Shurkai, there was no protection. For offense, it was absolute destruction. For defense, it was absolute invulnerability. That was Shunkyo. And this was only Shurkai. Bankai? It would be on an entirely different level. However, Uehara Shiroa's Bankai training had just begun. Even with his third-class captain-level Ryatsu, he still lacked the necessary strength to fully master Bankai. But he wasn't worried. With his task system, achieving Bankai was just a matter of time. As the night deepened, Uehara Shiroa prepared to receive the results from his Shadow Clones training. In his mind, he could clearly perceive Shunkyo's exclusive dimension, a vast personal space. It was as large as an entire city. For comparison, Obito's Kamui dimension was tiny in comparison. With such a massive training ground, his 4 shadow clones could train freely, even performing high-level techniques without spatial limitations. With a thought, one of his shadow clones dispersed, the one that had been training in Zanjutsu. Immediately, a flood of experience and memories surged into Uehara Shiroa's mind. He carefully processed and absorbed them. He could feel his swordsmanship improving. It was a sensation similar to receiving the system reward, Zanjutsu +1. Satisfied, he proceeded to dispel the remaining clones, those training in Kido, Shuinpa, and Hakuda. With each clone's dispelling, his combat proficiency silently increased. Stronger without even lifting a finger. If other Shinigami knew about this, even captains would die of envy. When the next morning arrived, Uehara Shiroa checked his daily task panel. System notification. Daily task: take a walk. Take a peaceful evening stroll. When you reach 99 years old, you will embrace the lifestyle of a wandering vagabond. Reward: random attribute +2. Reading the task description, Uehara Shiroa couldn't help but internally complain. In Soul Society, living to 99 isn't called longevity, it's called premature death. As always, daily tasks were easy, there were no penalties for failure, and they constantly provided steady growth. It was free power-ups every day. With a light stretch, he left his courtyard, ready to complete his daily mission. But before heading out, he made a quick stop. He went to visit the 1st Division's vice-captain, Sasaki Chojiro. This white-haired, golden-eyed old man was not to be underestimated. 1,000 years ago, during Yawacha's invasion of Soul Society, Sasaki Chojiro had been the one to stab Yawach in the back, allowing Captain Commander Yamamoto to land the finishing blow. Together, they saved Soul Society from total annihilation. Despite his strength and experience, Chojiro chose to remain as vice-captain, dedicating himself to serving under Yamamoto. Even though he had the qualifications to be a captain, his loyalty never wavered. Uehara Shiroa casually reported some of the recent intelligence he had gathered. Much of it was outdated or minor details, but effort mattered more than accuracy. After all, slacking off still required proper tactics. One could be lazy with subordinates, but in front of superiors, the best strategy was to appear hardworking. A good employee wasn't the one who worked the hardest, but the one who was always visible to the boss. As expected, Chojiro nodded approvingly, looking at Uehara Shiroa with relief. This young man is diligent after all, the vice-captain thought. Some people in Siriitai gossiped about Uehara Shiroa, calling him a lazy troublemaker. But wasn't he right here, working hard? As for his frequent visits to the red light district for drinks, meh. At least he wasn't as hopeless as Kayaraka Shunsui. Meanwhile, at the 8th Division, far away, Kayaraka Shunsui suddenly shivered. He frowned, rubbing his arms. Did the drinking incident get exposed? No, that's impossible. The old man has known about it for years. Maybe, some girls are thinking about me? He sighed dramatically. Being too charming is such a curse. The Siriitai, located at the center of Soul Society, was massive. It spanned 130,000 soul miles, with a radius of 365 soul miles. For comparison, Karakura town, home to 100,000 people, had a radius of only 1 soul mile. It would take an ordinary soul about 40 days just to walk around the outskirts of Siriitai. Arranged in a circular design, the city's outer walls were composed of sekiseki, which repelled spiritual energy. This barrier shielded Siriitii from outside intrusions, ensuring that only authorized individuals could enter. At each of the four main gates, north, south, east, and west, a powerful guardian stood watch, allowing only permitted personnel to pass. At that moment, Uehara Shiroa was wandering near the White Road Gate, enjoying the scenic view. The architecture was traditional, gray and white buildings, tiled rooftops, exuding a classic Japanese aesthetic. The air was fresh, and the closer he got to the center, the denser the spiritual particles became. Before he realized it, his daily task was already completed. System notification. Task complete. Reward, Zanjutsu +1, Ryatsu +1. Another effortless power-up. Life was good. Now, only one special mission remained on his panel. Witness the birth of the Visored. And the reason he had come to White Road Gate was to complete it. Support me at patreon.com/goldengaruda and check out more chapter of this. Chapter 5. As Uehara Shiroa stepped outside the White Road Gate, he immediately noticed a group of Shinigami moving in the same direction, toward Rukongai. Each of them had imposing physiques, some sporting khaki, streetwise hairstyles, giving them the look of either seasoned fighters or biker gang members. On the back of their Shihakusho, four bold characters stood out. 9th Division Combat Unit. At the front of the group stood none other than Mugyuruma Kensei, the captain of the 9th Division. Aside from Kensei, Uehara Shiroa also recognized two other familiar faces. One was Kuna Mashiro, the green-haired, carefree vice-captain, known for her overwhelming Hakuta skills and seemingly boundless energy. The other figure lurked in the shadows, as if he had faded from existence itself, Tozen Kaname, the 5th seat of the 9th Division. At this time, Tozen looked very different from his later years. Instead of his signature sunglasses and dreadlocks, he sported an afro, similar to the 7th Division captain, Lovekawa. Most of his face was obscured by a white mask, revealing only his closed eyes. Of course, this wasn't a hollow mask, just an ordinary one. Uehara Shiroa glanced at them briefly before continuing on his way, acting as if he hadn't noticed anything. He knew exactly why Mugyuruma Kensei was headed to Rukongai. The disappearances of Rukongai civilians had finally drawn the attention of the higher-ups. And this was the beginning of the holification incident. Silently, Aizen had already set his plans into motion, spinning a web of deception over Soul Society. The captains of the Gotei 13 had no idea what was coming. But this time, Uehara Shiroa intended to give Aizen a little surprise, while reaping the benefits for himself. As Uehara Shiroa leisurely strolled through the streets near the White Road Gate, he suddenly felt a presence. His gaze shifted toward the shadows. As if in response, a silver-haired figure stepped forward. The boy wore a Shinigami uniform, with a 5th Division armband on his right arm. With a sly smile, he greeted him. Uehara-kun, long time no see. Though his tone was light-hearted, there was something about him, something unnervingly cold, like the venomous stare of a snake. Uehara Shiroa let out a sigh, smirking. Jin Ikamaru. After all these years, you still haven't changed. Still walking around with your eyes closed all the time. That must be a genius thing, huh? The smirk on Ikamaru Jin's fox-like face grew wider. Uehara-kun, you're still as amusing as ever. Though their time as classmates had been brief, only about a year, Jin had always been somewhat intrigued by Uehara Shiroa. The reason? Unlike the other Shinigami in training, who worked tirelessly to improve their skills, Uehara Shiroa had always done things differently. One day, he'd skip training to go fishing. The next day, he'd wander off to the market. On other days, he'd sneak out for drinks. To outsiders, he seemed lazy, unmotivated, and wasting his potential. But Jin wasn't convinced. There was something strange about Uehara Shiroa. A kind of undeniable confidence, as if he already knew everything would work out for him. It was vague, but it was enough for Jin to pay attention. Testing the waters, Jin continued. I heard that Vice Captain Aizen thinks very highly of you. Promoted you to a seated officer, didn't he? Uehara Shiroa let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. Well, Jin-san. Vice Captain Aizen is one of the few honest men in Seoul society. You should work hard and never disappoint an honest man's expectations. There was something off about how he said that. Something subtly mocking, yet perfectly polite. Jin's expression didn't change, but his mind sharpened. Uehara Shiroa wasn't supposed to know anything. So why did it feel like he did? After a moment of silence, Jin simply nodded and smiled, showing gratitude toward Aizen as expected. But inside, his thoughts were churning. Was Uehara Shiroa really as simple as he seemed? Not wanting to overextend his probing, Jin simply waved and took his leave. For now. Meanwhile, in Rokangai, Mugiruma Kensei and his Squad 9 Shinigami stood in stunned silence. They had just saved a young boy, Hisagi Shuhei, from a hollow attack. But something wasn't right. There had been no signs of a cumin, black cavity, opening nearby. Where had this hollow come from? Then they found it. 10 fallen Shinigami. All completely intact, yet completely empty. Their bodies were fully preserved, but they were nothing more than shells. Their uniforms were still fastened, as if they had simply disappeared inside them. Their straw sandals still contained traces of their feet, as if their limbs had suddenly vanished. It was exactly the same as the disappearing civilians before. When souls perished in Seoul society, their bodies typically disintegrated into ryatsu. Yet these corpses remained intact. It wasn't death. It was erasure. And the disappearances had spread to the advance team itself. A cold chill crept down Kensei's spine. Without hesitation, he barked out urgent orders. Tozen. Report to the Central 46 immediately, tell them all 10 advance team Shinigami are missing under the same circumstances as the civilians. To-do. Get in touch with Squad 12, have them send in their technicians immediately to seal off the scene and investigate. Mashiro. Get everyone ready. We're staying here tonight. As Kensei finished giving orders, his eyes hardened. Whoever was behind this, they wouldn't get past the 9th Division. The Squad 9 members nodded in determination. Even Mashiro Kuna, despite her usual carefree nature, was fully prepared for battle. Shortly after, To-do returned with news. The vice captain of the 12th Division, Saragaki Hiyori, was already on her way. As for Captain Urahara Kisuk, he was currently occupied with his own secret research and unable to respond. Hearing this, Kensei finally felt a little relief. As night fell, Kensei patrolled the perimeter once more. Returning to his tent, he noticed Mashiro Kuna already fast asleep. Shaking his head, he sighed. Only someone as carefree as her could sleep so soundly right now. And then, a piercing scream shattered the silence outside. Support me at patreon.com/goldengaruda and check out more chapter of this or more early access chapter of my other fanfic translation. Chapter 6. In Rokandai, Kensei Mugiruma heard the blood-curdling screams and rushed out of the tent, gripping his zanpakuto tightly. The sight that greeted him was a massacre. 2 members of the 9th Division who had been on night watch lay motionless on the ground, their lifeblood seeping into the dirt, staining it crimson. Their lifeless eyes reflected the pale glow of the full moon above, a stark contrast to the burning rage in Kensei's heart. A short distance away, squad member To-do stood frozen, his zanpakuto still in his hand, yet there was no sign of movement. To-do. Kensei's eyes turned bloodshot, and he instinctively activated his shuriken. Tachike's, blow them away. The blade in his hand transformed, and Kensei took a step forward, ready to strike down the traitor before him. But then, he hesitated. To-do, who had been standing still just a moment ago, suddenly had blood gushing from his throat. He collapsed to the ground in an eerie silence. Something was wrong. Kensei's instincts screamed at him. Tadu's zanpakuto was clean. There was no trace of blood on the blade. If he had been the attacker, the weapon would have been stained. And the scream, Kensei suddenly realized it hadn't come from the squad members on the ground. It had come from Tadu. His unease deepened. The shadows around him felt heavier. This was no simple ambush. This was a carefully orchestrated trap. A trap set not just for his squad but for him, the captain of the 9th Division. Mashiro! Wake up! Kensei's thoughts turned to Mashiro Kuna, who was still sleeping inside the tent. Panic surged through him. He needed to wake Mashiro and get him out of here. He stepped back, turning toward the tent. Darkness. For a brief moment, his vision blurred. His body wavered. By the time his senses returned, a sharp, searing pain exploded in his chest. Kensei looked down. A narrow, deadly blade had pierced through his body from behind, its tip glistening with his blood. His grip on his zanpakuto trembled. He slowly turned his head, and his pupils shrank in sheer disbelief. You? Why? His voice was weak, filled with shock and betrayal. The full moon continued to bathe the land in its cold light, silently witnessing the tragedy unfold. Meanwhile, in the barracks of the 1st Division, Uehara Shiroha sat leisurely, absent-mindedly spinning a pair of thin-framed glasses between his fingers. His lips curled into a faint smile as he checked their details once more. Disguise glasses. Grade, B class. Type, technological product. Ability, completely disguises the user's appearance, spiritual pressure, temperament, voice, scent, and even the essence of their soul. Introduction. A Kryptonian creation, acquired after completing Special Mission 5, join the Gotii 13. When I put on these glasses, I am a harmless reporter. When I take them off, I am a god on Earth. This little tool was going to be invaluable tonight. Despite being only a B-class item, its effect was powerful, comparable, in some ways, to Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu. Just as he finished reviewing the item's details, a sharp voice interrupted his thoughts. Emergency call. Emergency call. An urgent situation has occurred. The spiritual pressures of Captain Kensei Mugyaruma and Vice Captain Mashiro Kuna have suddenly vanished. All captains are to gather at the 1st Division headquarters immediately. Uehara's smirk widened. It's finally begun. With Kensei and the others out of the picture, the stage was set. Without hesitation, Uehara split off a shadow clone. Unlike before, when he had dispelled all his clones, this was his first one of the night. It would remain in Soul Society, ensuring he had a solid alibi. That should be enough to fool even you, Aizen. The real Uehara, meanwhile, put on his disguise glasses. In an instant, his entire appearance changed. His once youthful face transformed into that of a composed, bespectacled middle-aged man. His spiritual pressure altered, becoming completely unrecognizable. Satisfied, he activated his Shunkyo space manipulation and slipped into the void. With this ability, he could freely enter and exit the alternate space, allowing him to traverse Soul Society undetected. Of course, such movement required spiritual energy. But with his immense reserves, the cost was negligible. The space around him was barren, save for a small corner filled with various items, several high-end fishing rods, multiple sets of clothing, shoes, and other necessities. Uehara casually picked up a white windbreaker that he had prepared in advance and swapped it with his Shinigami uniform. Then, he retrieved a mirror. The reflection that stared back at him was completely different from before. A handsome, bespectacled man with sharp black hair and a refined aura. As expected of me. Even when disguised, I'm still stunning. If only I were a little taller. He had even planned for that. The clothes and shoes he wore were stolen, borrowed, from a noble's mansion. No records, no proof. If someone tried to track him, they'd find nothing. A battle of deception against Aizen. It's all in the details. With everything in place, Uehara swiftly moved toward Rukangai. While the other captains were scrambling to gather at headquarters, he was already making his move. Thanks to Shunky's space manipulation, he bypassed every security barrier without effort. To the guards and patrols, he was nothing more than an invisible ghost. Within moments, he had breached the soul-sealing membrane, the supposedly impenetrable boundary between the Siriitii and Rukangai. As expected, it was utterly useless against him. Under the moon's watchful gaze, Uehara sharpened his spiritual senses. A moment later, he locked onto two distinct spiritual pressures. With a small smirk, he moved toward them without hesitation. Back at the 1st Division headquarters, tension filled the room. The captains of the Gotii 13 stood assembled, their expressions grim. Even the usually laid-back Kayaraka Shunsui was no longer smiling. His usual playfulness had been replaced with razor-sharp focus. In a single night, an entire team had vanished without a trace. Not just any team, but the 9th Division, along with its captain and vice-captain. This was no ordinary attack. The only one who remained completely unfazed was Yamamoto Genryosai Shigekuni. The ancient leader stood firm, his wooden cane pressed into the floor as he issued orders with unshakable authority. 3rd Division Captain, Rojuro Odoribashi, rose. 5th Division Captain, Hirako Shinji. 7th Division Captain, Love Ekawa. You three will lead the search and rescue operation. 2nd Division Captain, Shihoin Yoruchi. Remain on standby. 6th Division Captain, Kochiki Jinrei. 8th Division Captain, Kayaraka Shunsui. 13th Division Captain, Yukitake Jushiro. You will assist me in defending the Siriitii. 4th Division Captain, Unohana Retsu. Prepare for the wounded. With the orders given, the captains moved. Support me at patreon.com/goldengaruda and check out more chapter of this or more early access